for a year. And I was really taken by the possibility of living in Europe. So after studying in France for a year, I had to go back and get a job. I couldn't afford to be a lifetime student. And I went back to New York and I worked for a bank, a big bank called Citibank. And I ended up staying with them for 18 years. I worked in New York, I worked in London, I worked in Helsinki, Istanbul, Brussels, and even in Jersey in the Channel Islands. After that, I worked for another bank in London called the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which was set up to assist the transition of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. At one point, I left that bank, moved back to Finland. My wife is Finnish, and I had met her when I lived here earlier. And for the last 25 years, I've been doing teaching, consulting, advising, and coaching for organizations, for executives. As you heard, I've lived in the UK twice, and so I have a great affinity for London and the whole country. But I was there in March. I'm actually coming to London next week. I've written 3 books, actually. The first book was called Managing Your Strengths. The second book is called Performance at the Limit, Business Lessons from Formula One Motor Racing. And that has really taken off over the years. It's 20 years old. It's had 3 editions. With that book, my colleagues and I made a TV series with the BBC called Formula for Success. That book has been translated into Japanese and Turkish and into Mandarin Chinese. And I lecture all over the world and teach workshops using Formula One as a basis for how you can learn about leadership and teamwork and innovation and so on.
That certainly pricked my ears up because I'm an F1 fan and a bit of a petrol head.
That's great. It's been really great fun. When I do work using that, it's too much fun. I enjoy it too much, perhaps. That book was published by Cambridge University Press. The most recent book that Carol referred to, I wrote and was published last July, by another UK-based publisher called Practical Inspiration Publishing. And the title of that book is Exploding Turkeys and Spare Trousers, Adventures in Global Business. And the way that book came out was because of COVID, actually. Like all of you, I had to adjust to a time when we were in isolation and we were locked down to fill my time and to try to maintain my relationships with clients and colleagues. And one of the things I did during isolation was to start writing not my memoirs, but memories of events and occasions where I had funny things or interesting experiences around the world, in China, in Russia, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. And I realized that for each of these stories, there was a lesson to be learned about life or about leadership, about working in business. And that's what the book is. It's 53 one-page stories about my experiences and the lessons that I feel anyone can learn from those experiences. It came about because with a group of colleagues, we decided to support each other with weekly LinkedIn postings. And they were posting about their research or their activities. I really didn't know what to write about until my daughter reminded me that whenever I'm speaking, I'm always telling stories. And she said, why don't you delve into your toolkit of stories? And that's what I did. The trick was, of course, when I started to do this with LinkedIn, at that point in time, LinkedIn restricted your character count to 1,300. That's no longer the case, but when I wrote it, it was the case. So I ended up having to edit to get these stories down to 1,300 characters. And it was a great experience. They were getting pretty good recognition online, reviews, reactions, and several colleagues said, why don't you turn that into a book? So the 53 stories, perhaps 25 had appeared in LinkedIn during COVID, the worst part of COVID, and the others I added to the story. And that's the book that Carol was referring to. It's been out since last July. It's available in paperback at Amazon. It's available in ebook or Kindle. And a new experience for me, I actually narrated the audiobook for it. So that's available as well if you're interested. It's very inexpensive. So if you're interested, go on and look for the book, Exploding Turkeys and Spare Trousers, Adventures in Global Business.
The link is in the chat, everybody.
Thank you for that. The title refers to two of the stories, one that took place in Turkey and when we lived in Istanbul, and the other that took place in the United States during one of my business trips. But in addition to the book, COVID allowed all of us perhaps to reflect a little bit on a lot of things. And I was being asked to write a number of articles for various publications and online publications, of course. And one of them, they asked me, what is the key to success in business? How do you become a great leader? And I reflected on all these years that I've had experience working around the world and writing this book. And I came up with 3 C's. So, C's like this. Is that the right direction? Is it like this? Like that? So not oceans and seas. And I thought I'd share with you those 3 C's as key to what one should consider in order to be an excellent leader, to be successful in business. I might even throw in a bonus 1 or 2 extra C's when I'm finished. I won't talk for long because I'd like to share this with you and then we can leave it open for questions. So let me get on my way and talk about the first C. And it fits very well into what you do with Carol and Gary and the others that work with you. And that's being a great communicator. Learning to communicate, not just in writing, in speaking, in how you relate to people. It's wonderful if you want to be entrepreneurial and have great ideas, innovative ideas, but unless you can learn to share them in a way that allows people to understand, you're not going to get very far. We talk in business about the importance of having a vision. What is our purpose? But unless you're a great communicator and share that vision in a way that you inspire people, they get it, they get the idea, they want to work with you, they want to follow you, you're not going to get them on board. So communication is key to being a successful leader. And it's not about just talking. In fact, there's a great quote by Peter Ustinov, who most of you are too young to remember, but a great actor, writer, philosopher, Sir Peter Ustinov, by the way. And he said that communication is the art of being understood. It's not one way. It's not me just talking at you. It's me talking and writing in a way that you get it and you understand it and you can do something with it. Great leaders have a way of connecting to people. They have a way of having if you're in a large room and the leader is speaking to the audience, he has a way or she has a way of connecting with you personally. It's a marvelous skill that every great speaker develops. Some are born with it, some have to learn how to do it. But in the way they look across the room, the way they address their remarks, it's just a wonderful moment when you feel sitting in the audience that that speaker is speaking to you directly. And likewise, when a great leader is speaking to you personally or in a small group, they have a way of making you feel that you're the most important person in the room. And that's something that you can learn to develop if you don't have it naturally. The other thing in terms of communication that great leaders do is that they're great listeners. They have a way of, again, making you feel that you're important. And I speak in front of groups all the time, and the most wonderful thing about the opportunity, particularly when I'm teaching a workshop, is what I learn from people. Last week, I was in Ljubljana, Slovenia, talking and working in a workshop with a leadership team of a company. And I can tell you, I wrote back to them saying, I hope you learned as much from me as I learned from you, because it was just a great experience, keeping your ears open, being open-minded. There's a famous New York-based American named Bernard Baruch. He was a philanthropist, very wealthy man, probably late 19th, early 20th century, if I remember correctly. And he said that most of the successful people I've known are the ones who do more listening than talking. It's amazing what you can learn just by listening. So learn to become an effective communicator, writing, speaking, and listening. That's my first C, communication. The second C is keeping in mind that none of us do any of our accomplishments alone. And I can say that about any business or any activity. You may be a great tennis player, but you're not going to succeed unless you have what we sometimes call the entourage around you, the coaches, the physical therapist, the publicist, the personal assistant, and so on. Or even take Formula One drivers, since Carol is such a fan. If you look at any one of them, they've got a team around them which are supporting them in every way possible. And what I'm trying to get at is the second C, which is collaboration. If you're working in an organization, try to create a collaborative culture. That's three C's, create a collaborative culture. It's all about teamwork. And teamwork should not be taken for granted. One needs to build a culture in a small business of 2, 3, 5, 7 people, or 1,000 or more people, of great teams. A team is more than just a group of people coming together to do something. An effective team is a group of individuals who share a common goal, a common vision. They understand the roles they have to play in delivering what needs to be delivered to achieve that goal. And they can do so in the term we use these days is called psychological safety. They do their work in an environment where they're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid to challenge the ideas of their colleagues or their bosses, if the bosses allow that kind of atmosphere to be created. And the collaborative culture is certainly the key to getting the most out of your people, getting the most out of their individual individual contributions to the collaboration that's required to be successful as an organization. And I'd say collaboration is also a good part of the diversity and inclusiveness that we require in all organizations, now and always. Creating a team of like-minded people is nice, but it's not going to get you creative ideas and challenges, constructive challenges. We want to build teams where you have people from different backgrounds, different points of view, different education, to help you come up with the best solution possible. So my second C after communication is collaboration. Develop your organization, as small or as big as it's going to be, based on an atmosphere of diversity, inclusion, and psychological safety, so that you get the most out of everyone working on that problem or that vision in a collaborative way. My third C is one which I've learned over time is probably one of the most important things you can consider. And it started with my first job back way many years ago. On the first day that I walked into this office, the boss of the department called me into his office, and he said, okay, of all things, I expect you to act as a professional. And I, because I was a young guy, I didn't know anything, I nodded my head and I said, sure, yeah, I'll be a professional. I walked out of the office and I had no clue what that meant. What is a professional? In banking or in engineering or in law? I had no clue. And over the years, I've kind of developed my own sense of what that means. And it comes down to one word: character. And you might even use another C, credibility. Because what I've learned is that in your working life, and maybe even in your personal life, you're filling a virtual reservoir of credibility. Every choice you make, every decision you make, every action you take is filling that pool, that reservoir of who you are and what you stand for, what your values are, what your beliefs are. Are you dependable? Are you reliable? Are you authentic? Are you the person who is willing to work with teams? Are you confident? And so on and so forth. All of these things are functions of how you behave. And how you behave are a function of your values and the beliefs that you have. And we all come from different backgrounds. We were raised in different households, in different situations, with different religions, perhaps. And all of this makes us unique. And that's wonderful thing about the fact that we are different. But you're going to be judged, if you will. And judge is not necessarily a great word, but you're going to be observed by what you say, the choices you make, and the actions you take. And all that adds to your credibility. If you develop in your life as someone who's perceived as reliable, credible, that's going to help you in so many ways, whether it's attracting people to work with you, people to believe in your vision, or maybe even getting the bank loan that you need to help start up your business. It's all about credibility. And the other thing that credibility reflects on is another big word. It doesn't begin with a C, but it begins with I, and that's integrity. Part of building up your credibility is being perceived as someone with integrity, someone who's honest, someone who's open, someone who's fair, someone who's reasonable. And here's the remarkable thing about integrity and your character. It takes a lifetime of continual action to develop and be seen as someone who has integrity and has a great character. And here's the remarkable thing. It takes only one action, one act, or one thing that can cause all of that foundation that you've built to crack. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you, but I'm saying that to remind you that we're always being observed, we're always being judged in some ways. And I can tell you, if you want to be a leader, leaders are on stage all the time. They're being watched by all of their employees. They're being watched by other stakeholders, investors, shareholders, suppliers, the media. And the moment you make a move that calls your integrity into question, your foundation shatters. So I don't want to leave you with the thought that you should be scared about making tough decisions, taking risks, but doing it in an authentic way where your integrity is intact is crucial. So communication, collaboration, and character, or character can be credibility as well. Those are the three that I talk about a lot in doing leadership development. And it's an individual thing. Leaders all are different. Some leaders have great charisma who command an audience just by walking in the room. I wrote one story in the book about going to actually the British Grand Prix a few years ago. And I'm privileged to get into the paddock area and to the team uh, motorhomes and garages. And I went in to talk to someone at the Mercedes team in this area where they have refreshments and food. And as I walked in, I noticed someone sitting at a table. And I realized that it was Sean Connery. This was before his death a few years ago. And he was there with his wife. And it was a remarkable moment because everyone was leaving him alone. It was clear this was a private time for him. Uh, he didn't look like the James Bond that we all think about. He was a bit older and a bit less fit. But I can tell you, there was maybe it was just me because I've always loved Connery as the James Bond, but there was something about the aura that he emitted just by sitting there, and people almost were walking around him in an invisible shield, trying not to pay attention. Now, I use that as one example. Other examples, people have said that some great leaders, when they walk into the room, everything just revolves around them. That's charisma. But not all leaders are like that. You can be an introvert and be a leader by having great communication capability, character, credibility, and getting the most out of people that you work with. Here's another two C's, and then I'll stop and take some questions if you like, or hear your comments. I'd like to hear if you have any thoughts about any of these ideas. The fourth C is culture, and I mean that in the terms of multiculture. As you've heard, I grew up in the States. I've lived in many, many different countries. I married a woman from a different culture. I've worked all around the world, and I feel like I am so much more privileged because of it. The world is huge, and there are so many differences and many similarities at the same time. One needs to approach other cultures with an open mind and learn from what they have to offer. There's often conflict, there's often misunderstandings. My wife's third language is English. She spoke Swedish first, Finnish second, and English third, and we're constantly misunderstanding each other. Nowadays, it's mostly laughs when it happens. Even though I do speak good Swedish and I understand most Finnish, it always leads to great laughter when we realize we misunderstood each other. I'll tell you a story about working across culture. Very often when I've had to teach across culture, I've used interpreters. And there are two ways that interpretation can happen. One is simultaneously, and that you often see at the UN, for example. They'll have earpieces in their ears in the audience, and while the speaker is speaking in a certain language, the interpreters sitting in the booths in the back will speak into your language, and they're doing a great job. I really admire the skill of interpreters. It's very, very difficult because it's not just translation, it's interpretation. But the other type of interpretation is what we call sequential. And you speak a few sentences, and the interpreter speaks a few sentences. And there was a story that I was told many, many years ago by a professor from Harvard. And it stuck with me about the skill of interpretation. He said he was in Japan, and he was talking to a group of businessmen, and it was sequential, and he was saying a few things, and the interpreter was interpreting. And you're always watching your audience as a speaker. You're trying to get signals. Do they understand? Do they get what I'm saying? And he felt that he was connecting to the group through the interpreter. So he decided to tell a joke. Now, probably some of you in the audience here speak several languages, and you know that one of the riskiest things you can do is try to tell a joke in another language. But he thought he'd take the risk. So he started to tell the joke, and the interpreter interpreted. And then the professor told the punchline to the joke, and the interpreter said the punchline, and everybody laughed. And the professor felt pretty good about that. And he concluded his presentation. And afterwards, he went up to the interpreter and said, "Wow, I know I took a risk in telling that joke, but you must have done a great job because they all laughed." And the interpreter said, "Well, honorable professor, I must tell you that when you started to tell the joke and I realized where you were going with it, all I said to the audience was, the professor is telling a joke. And then when you said the punchline, the only thing I said to the audience was, the joke is now finished, please laugh." And it really awakened me to the fact that if you're working in a cross-cultural situation, there's only one person you really need to convince that they understand what you're saying, and that is the interpreter. Now, when I work with interpreters, I always brief them ahead of time. I always talk to them about the jargon I'm going to use, the technical terms, to make sure that that will work well. Now, all this to say, if you have a chance to work in a multicultural environment, I certainly suggest you try to do it. It's a wonderful experience, and you can learn a ton. And the final C that I would share with you as the bonus fifth C is coaching. During my years working and advising and consulting, I've been coaching executives without really knowing it. I've been advising them on things they should do, actions they should take, ways to think. The thing you have to understand, particularly in organizations, is it's very lonely at the top. Senior leaders, CEOs, have very few people to talk to, because anytime they need to talk to someone in the organization, there's always some agenda. There's always a subordinate relationship. And they have to be very careful when they talk upwards to their boards, because they're hired and fired by their board of directors. So finding a coach has become a very, very important thing for leaders at all levels of an organization. You don't have to be the CEO. 20 years ago, coaching was perceived as remedial. Something is wrong. They've hired a coach to help Ken fix a problem. He's too aggressive, or he doesn't listen to anyone, whatever it might have been. Today, it's almost the opposite. If you don't have a coach, you're not really important. The company doesn't think that you're worth developing. Now, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it makes a lot of sense. If you look at musicians, you look at actors, you look at athletes, they all have coaches, no matter what their ages. They always need someone to look at their actions and their behaviors from the outside to help them improve. And I might say that coaching is not about fixing people. It's about helping people get better at what they're doing. Now, all of you are quite young, but it doesn't preclude two things. One, if someone offers you an opportunity to be coached, that can we help you? Don't look at it as a negative, look at it as a positive. And the second thing is, as Carol and her colleagues are doing, they're in effect coaching you as well. So if you have an opportunity after you've learned what you're learning through this work academy and other things you do, and someone needs help, volunteer to help them. You don't have to be a 60-year-old man or woman with 30, 40 years of experience to be able to give useful inputs to someone who might need a little bit of help. If nothing else, they might need someone just to listen to them and hear out their problems and their concerns. So, communication, collaboration, your character, culture or multicultural, and coaching. Great opportunities for you to improve as a leader and to learn. if I leave you with one thought, I've been around for many years, never stop learning. Every day is an opportunity for you to learn something new and take advantage of that when you can. I think I'll
Thank
stop there, Carol, and
you.
see if there are any thoughts people want to share. It doesn't have to be a
Thanks.
question, but however you guys want to take it.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, this community is pretty good at that. I've noticed a lot of people helping other people out. We have WhatsApp groups, Ken, and people will put a question there and somebody will always jump in and help out. In the early days, of course, it was just me and Gary. Now, there's loads of people who are more able to help than Gary and I. We've got some questions coming in already. So I saw Paul first. Paul, what did you want to ask?
Hi, Ken. I was just wondering what influenced you and inspired you to move to Helsinki and work in that different culture. So, obviously America's a huge place. I was just wondering, how you learned about Finland and how you decided that was going to be the place for you.
Good question. And by the way, I'm sure if you're following the news, we're having very, very historic discussions in Finland right now. The president and the prime minister yesterday voiced their thoughts that we should join NATO. And after being a non-aligned country for many years, this is probably the third most important historic decision that Finland is taking. The first was gaining independence from Russia in 1917. The second was joining the European Union. And the third is this joining NATO, which looks like it will happen. It's a funny story, actually, Paul. I was living in London. This is the early 80s. I was living in Pimlico, but I was actually working in Lewisham. That's where Citibank had its training center for Europe. And at the end of one day, I met at a cocktail reception in Lewisham, the head of Europe for Citibank. And he knew I was looking for a new assignment. And I had looked at various assignments, maybe going to Mexico and a few other things. And he said to me, "Would you like to go to a new frontier?" And I said, "That's intriguing." And he said, and I said to him, "We're already in 80 or 100 countries as a corporation." And he told me that Citibank had received the license to open up the first foreign bank in Finland. And quite frankly, maybe like some of you in this group, I knew Finland was up north somewhere. I didn't know how far east it was, with a 800-mile border to Russia. I said, "Well, that's interesting." And I flew up, and it was a December, and it was so, so cold and so, so snowy. But I really liked the people, and I thought, let's take it on. Why not try a new adventure? And I was responsible for what we called the corporate bank activities. And I was here for about 9 months when someone introduced me to the woman who became my wife. And that solidified my love for the country. We stayed for 4 years, or I stayed for 4 years, and then we moved to Istanbul. We moved back in '96 from London when I had the chance to do that and set up my own consulting business. Because while our older son was already in college in the US, our daughter was only about 10 years old, and we thought it would be great for her to have an experience living in Finland, because to that point she had lived in Belgium and Turkey and the UK. And I said to my wife, "Let's move back, let's try it." And it turned out to be a great place to make our home. And I became a dual Finnish US citizen, about 8, 9, 10 years ago. So I'm proud to be a European and proud to live in Finland. Safe. By the way, the last 4 or 5 years voted the happiest country in the world. So
Wow.
there you go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great question. Michelle, I did see your hand up. Are you still around?
Yeah. Hi, Ken. I wanted to ask, when you spoke about collaboration and psychological safety, there's been times in the past where I want to express my opinion, maybe in a work environment, and it comes across blunt or direct or even disrespectful. So how could I maybe work on this where I can express my opinion in a group, in a work environment without maybe coming
Upsetting
off
people.
without upsetting people.
Well, I think you've started on the path of fixing or that issue by, first of all, the awareness that you're showing that it's happening. Because there are many people who are very direct and often rude without even realizing it. So that's number one. Number two, I guess another thing to think about is always count to 3 or 5 before you say something. If you hear something and you want to react to it, before you jump in, literally go 1, 2, 3 in your head. And during that count, try to gauge whether you're going to come on too strong with the way you're going to say it. So you're kind of self-correcting or self-coaching, if you will. And the other thing is, you sound, just from your very question, it sounds like you understand the difference between being direct, too direct. Read the room. It sounds like I think you probably have the skill to understand that this idea is important to share, but maybe I can share it in a less aggressive way. If you can kind of do that self-correction and rephrase your thought, or maybe rather than say it direct, try to find a way to ask it as a question. If you do this, it won't work. You might be able to say, hey, I have a question for you. If we tried this, that, and the other, would it work better or would it still not work? So maybe that's another little tactic to try. But be aware of the room. And then the other thing you could always do, if you really feel you need to say something, even though the room may allow for psychological safety, is take it offline and maybe wait till the meeting's over and approach someone and ask, hey, I thought it was too controversial to raise in the room, but what do you think of this idea?
I think that's
Helpful?
all really good advice. And the other thing, a couple of things that I would add to that are quite often when you've got an idea and you're passionate about it, or a strong opinion about something, if you can take the ego out of the situation, i.e. the need for you to be heard and the need for you to have your idea, validated, and seek to understand before seeking to be understood. So what I mean by that is, if somebody else has got a very set idea, then, to say to them something along the lines of, well, I can hear that that's really important to you, or that you really feel that that's not going to work. Can you explain to me, why that is? I'd like to understand. So that first of all, you're listening to them, because then the law of reciprocity is they'll have to listen to you when you say your bit later on. But also just looking at the outcome that you want. So what is the outcome? If the outcome is to achieve a certain thing, is the way to do it, going to be to let the other person think it's their idea? And does that matter so long as you get the outcome? So it's, just taking a step back from that. And as Ken said, thinking about how you put that, and it will be different with different people, the approach that you need to take. Great question.
Thank you. I think I'm definitely going to try the counting to 5. I need to do that.
That's a very good idea. Or even sleep on it first is another good idea. And if I've got an angry email to write, I write it, so I've got it all out of my system, and then I just leave it till the next day, and then I reread it when I've had a sleep, see if I still want to send it. Okay, any other questions or observations, comments? I tried to take some of Ken's notes and put them into the chat as we were going, so you might find a little summary in there if you want to copy and paste that. And also Ken's LinkedIn URL is in there. Are you okay for people to link with you, Ken?
Of course,
LinkedIn?
Sure. Let me just say, I'm not posting as often as I was during the lockdown period. I'm trying, and you all becoming experts in social media. I was a novice at this, and I actually hired an advisor when I was publishing the book to help me come to grips with how to deal with particularly LinkedIn and Facebook. Not so much involved with Insta, although I'm there, and Twitter, not as much, but I'm there sometimes. So every other week or so, I'm posting something about my experience. I just posted the other day about working in Slovenia last week, and I had never been to Ljubljana, and it was just a lovely, lovely city. So sometimes it's a bit like that, sometimes it's a bit more serious, but happy to connect with any of you, sure.
Great. And I've also put the link to Exploding Turkeys in there as well, which is on Amazon, which is just a great name for a book. I love that. Okay, brilliant. Any other questions from anybody? If not, can we all have, I'm going to take a screenshot. Can we all either turn our cameras on for a minute or get ready to put a love heart emoji or a thumbs up emoji into the box when I say, and those who are watching on their camera, please smile. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Emojis, please. Yay. Brilliant. We'll put a post up about that and tag you into it, Ken, later.
Thanks very
on
much.
LinkedIn.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your time today. It was really interesting. Yeah, thanks for coming and being part of our community for the day. The recording will go up in the guest speakers part of the website, everybody, later on, so you can watch it back, or if you're watching later on, you won't have missed anything. So I'll see all of you guys on Monday, and Ken, thank you again, and hopefully we'll connect and speak on LinkedIn from time to time.
Okay, great. Nice to see you all.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stella and Rihanna.